Now, let me introduce tonight's speaker, Dr. Po-shen Lo. Dr. Lo is a professor of mathematics at Carnegie Mellon University. And he's also the national coach of the United States International Math Olympiad team. Under his coaching, the team won the competition in 2015, 16, 18, and 19. Those are their first victories since 1994. He's the founder of XP, I hope I said it correctly, that does online education of math and science. He's also the founder of Novid, which is a contact tracing app and also is a new way to fight pandemics. All right, without further ado, please join me and welcome Dr. Lo. Dr. Lo, welcome.
Hi, everyone. I just want to double check. Are you all able to hear me as I'm speaking right now? The easiest way to find out is I'm also curious about my audience. Whenever I give a talk, I like to know what are they interested in. And usually I make that estimate based on how old their kids are. So if you don't mind, if you could please type into the chat, if you're willing, whether your kid, the grade that your kid is going to, and maybe whether or not they're doing mathematics outside of school. And if so, what kind? That actually is quite useful. I can see the chat in front of me. So as people type things in, then I see 7th grade. Oh, we got all kinds of things. 4th
Dr.
grade.
Lo, sorry to interrupt. According to our poll today, 46% of participants are under grade 5, and 60% are grade 5 to 8, 5% above grade 8.
Okay, that sounds good. So we have a lot of people who are in elementary and middle school, and relatively few who are in high school. And it's interesting because this is usually the age ranges that people are paying a lot of attention to their kids' education. Somehow in high school, parents are less involved. But that actually goes to show that's why it's important that you do the right thing in elementary and middle school. Because unfortunately, by the time your kids reach high school, it's quite hard to tell them what to do. In some sense, if you tell them what to do, they might do exactly the opposite. So that's where I want to come in and say a few things about what direction to go in. This talk is titled around invention. And I want to talk about the invention because people are often wondering, what are we supposed to do with math? Especially if the background of people who are coming in is that they came from an education system which might have had very difficult curriculum, lots of practice problems, and important exams. And I'm going to guess that most of your audience is based outside of China. Actually, I'm going to guess most of them are in the US. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, in which case this is then very useful because the first thing I want to put out is what's the real goal of all of the work that we're doing in the education anyway? We think a lot about this because I work in education too. And in some sense, the real goal is that your children are able to succeed and have great lives for themselves later on. But that's too abstract and that's too hard to reach for. So usually people try to find something that you can measure. And that might be in the form of exam scores, test scores, the schoolwork. Some people measure based on whether or not their kid has skipped enough grades of math. So maybe if they're taking math that are 3 grades higher than what they're supposed to be, then you feel like you're doing well. But actually, I want to point out those are not actually directly related to eventually being able to do well. In fact, something that's a bit closer related to doing well might be things like getting into famous universities. And some people, especially by the time they reach high school, start setting the goal to wanting to get into some famous university. Of course, people who are working with elementary school kids probably aren't thinking about that yet. But here's something I'll tell you, which is very important to know. When you apply for universities in the United States, it's fundamentally different from applying to universities in China. There's no gaokao here. In fact, even the SAT, which is the American math and English exam, is not taken that seriously by all of the universities either. In which case, what is important? Well, what I'm claiming is that the most important thing is to use the time in the elementary and middle schools to learn how to invent things. What does that even mean? Well, that's actually a different philosophy to education. You see, a lot of people ask me, can I recommend them a book with all of the methods that you need in order to do well on competition? And they want that book to have so many practice problems so that when the exam comes, their hope is that their student will look at the exam and every single question they will already have seen before, and they will do it so fast that it's just automatic. They want that there's no thinking needed on the exam, so you get a very high score. Yeah, but now the problem is that if you're very good at that, you're very good at not inventing things. Actually, it runs exactly opposite in some sense. If you think about it, the fun part, or not the fun part, the part that's the most useful is the ability to have to think, to do something that's not automatic. For that, I want to share some of my own experiences. So I grew up in the United States of America. My parents are from Singapore. And when I was young, I was in elementary school. And when I was in elementary school, my parents were not sure if they were going to stay in the US or go back to Singapore. So they wanted to make sure that if they went back to Singapore, I would not be the bottom of the class. You see, back then in Singapore, every year, all of the students would get sorted from top to bottom. And then the next year, all of the classes would be arranged where the top students are together, the next ones are together, and all the bottom are together. Some people are nodding. Maybe you're also used to systems that work like this. Well, so their hope was that if they went back to Singapore, I would not be sorted into the bottom section, right? And so what they did is they made sure to buy the textbooks from Singapore so that whenever I was studying in the US, I would also be keeping up with whatever the level was for the exact same age students in Singapore. So I ended up learning quite a bit of math in that particular way, where my mother was the one teaching me. And because it was Singapore, there was also Chinese language. So that also was an important skill that I had to pick up, because otherwise, if I went back to Singapore, I'd be stuck, right? But I want to share that when I was young, the way that I was learning the math was actually quite standard. Standard meaning, here are some problems on fractions. Do them. Okay. Well, I remember that in elementary school, I was basically good at doing those problems, but I didn't think that I was necessarily great at coming up with new ways to do things. It was later on in middle school when I discovered the math competitions that I started to really realize how to invent mathematically. You see, because the difference between the middle school math competitions and the textbook problems where you just add and subtract fractions are that when you add and subtract fractions, if you don't know how to do it, it's because you didn't practice enough. But if you look at a math contest problem, the people writing the problem tried to make problems where even if you practiced, ideally the problem still involves some invention. I also help to write problems. Whenever I write problems and whenever my colleagues write problems, we are the most proud of problems that look strange. It's a very funny game, actually. If you look at a math contest, you might be used to thinking of the idea that the problems are just, some standard problems. But what actually happens behind the scenes is that all these creative people are thinking to themselves, how can I ask a problem that has not been asked before? And whenever any of us comes up with one, oh boy, we share it with each other. We're so happy about it. What I'm trying to share is that there's an entire contest to write good contest problems that's happening behind the contest that you don't know. However, why am I saying this? I'm saying this because I'm trying to emphasize that the solution should not be to just try to have practiced everything and memorized everything, because you're actually going up against people who are trying to come up with things that you can't practice. And furthermore, then eventually you apply to US university. And it's quite interesting. When you apply to US university, the universities aren't actually looking for people who just have high test scores. In fact, oftentimes you hear these stories about how admissions officers say, yeah, the student only has high test scores. And instead they go pick someone who has lower test scores. It's because the test scores only measure what you can do on tests. And a lot of tests are designed so that you don't actually have to invent anything. How many years ago? Maybe about 5 years ago, I was at a big conference, education conference in the United States. And there was a speaker at that conference. His name was Sal Khan. Perhaps you have heard of Khan Academy. That's the guy who made Khan Academy. He was one of the speakers. He was on stage together with the person who was in charge of the SAT exams that year. So they were both on stage, and they were both there because they were announcing that the SAT had changed. Actually, the leader of the SAT thing was very proudly telling everyone, the SAT has changed. We're no longer making the SAT. This was a few years ago, 5 to 10 years ago, saying that we're no longer making the SAT a test of whether or not a person could figure something out. We're changing the SAT to be just an exam for which every single problem type, all you have to do is practice. And they were proud of that. And in fact, Khan Academy, Khan was on the stage because Khan was also was saying, and we're proud to partner with SAT because now we have a machine to help you just practice those methods until you can just do them all automatically. So that if you want a good SAT score, all you have to do is practice enough. And then you have a good SAT score. I remember thinking at the time while I was listening to that talk, well, in that case, we need to find a better way to go and figure out who can actually think. Because you see, I work at Carnegie Mellon University. I don't make our admissions decisions, but I work with our students. I teach our students. I have seen that the most successful students are the ones for whom you give them something they've never seen before, and they can figure it out. Not the ones who just are used to seeing something from before and do it. Because by the way, the world changes. You know, I'm following the news these days. It looks like we might be coming into some bad news soon. I don't know how many of you were paying attention in the last few days, some new announcements about COVID. Don't know if anyone saw this. In the southern part of Africa, there's some new COVID variant, which has something like many, like 10 or something mutations on the spike protein. And people are worried that because all the mutations happened on the part that was the direct target of all the vaccines that we got, now we might have to go back to square one. I'm just giving this example of how the world changes. And I gave this example today, but a year ago, the example I was giving was, who would have thought that a pandemic could shut down the entire world? But what I'm trying to emphasize is that anybody who thought that you can go through life just using ideas that you have been taught before so that you just do them, that way of life is over. The world changes too fast now. If you like that way of life, you need to go back to the year 1500. Then all you have to do is plant rice in the paddy. Every day is the same, won't change. I'm really glad we don't live in those times anymore, if you think about it, right? Actually, if you just think about it, you should be thinking to yourself, that would be a very painful and boring life. And every single day is the same. Once you realize that what the most value is, the biggest value in our human existence, it's creativity. Now you can think about why kids don't like math. By the way, I've talked to lots of kids, and a lot of kids say they don't like math because it's not creative, because it's boring, because all you do is you have to memorize something and put the numbers in and do it. It's because human beings don't like to just follow orders without thinking. Just think about the rice paddies example, right? That's not what we want to do. Then how do you break out of it? You break out of it by being one of the people who's able to invent ideas. And in this world we live in, we're lucky. We have enough space for more than one person to be an inventor. We live in a world with modern technology, where if you grow up in one decade, the people who grow up the next decade somehow know more than you already about some things that you never knew about. So those people have a chance to invent something else. I see this with my own kids, you know. I think I'm pretty technologically savvy, but now I have kids. Oh boy, they can do all kinds of funny things. But of course, they grew up around smartphones. I didn't. I grew up around computers. I talked to my parents. My parents didn't grow up around computers. But if you just think about all of these things, there are so many opportunities to come up with something new because the world is changing faster and faster and faster. And that's why the way I approach all of this education is I say the goal of the math learning, actually, in this modern generation, should be to teach you how to come up with a new idea. And I came to this thought when I went back to think about how I learned about math, which might actually be something that many of the audience here can relate to if you're also parents. You see, when I did math competitions in middle school, I was growing up in Madison, Wisconsin. That's not a big city, and there were not lots of teachers. There were not lots of books. I couldn't search things on the internet. There wasn't really an internet. I didn't know the internet existed, right? So when I was doing these middle school math competitions, these are problems which are designed in a way that you're not supposed to know how to do them. That's the goal. The goal of these problems is supposed to be that you don't know what to do. And then when you look at the question, you have to then start to think, how might I try to do this? Actually, I don't really like speaking about everything just abstractly. So let me draw a few things. Whenever you have a math person give a talk, unfortunately, that means that they might bring their blackboard. Now, if you want to go and see what I'm drawing, the way to do this is, I can do it myself. I spotlighted the video to everyone. And so what that means is that my screen should now be very large. And if for some reason for you, my screen becomes small, just right click on my screen and click pin video, right? But I just want to give an example of a math competition problem, right? So one of the ones that I like to share with people is something like this, just to give an idea of what does it mean to think creatively. I actually used to use this problem as an interview question as well. But suppose I drew a square, okay? So here's a square. And this particular square happens to have two triangles that are drawn like this and like this. And there are 3 and 4 and 3 and 4. Okay, so I drew two triangles, and actually many of you know if it's 3 and it's 4, the Pythagorean theorem will give you a 5 over there, okay? But now the question asked, how long is that? Now the reason this is a good math contest question is because there are actually many ways to do it. And I'm giving this as an example to show this is the kind of problem you want to have your kids working on, not a question that just says, I have all these right triangles. Here's some side, calculate the third side, right? You don't need to do page after page after page of those unless you're preparing only for exam. And I explained in the United States, we don't have those exams to prepare for, so don't bother. It's much better to say, okay, great, you understand the Pythagorean theorem, now play with this. I like this problem because, as I said, I gave it as an interview problem. One way people do it, sometimes they just try to calculate all kinds of like lengths and whatever. But it turns out that this question is just very elegant. If you think carefully, I'm actually looking at this to see, I just saw that somebody made a comment inside the chat about, yeah, essays and teachers' recommendations matter too. I can comment more about that later about college admissions. But then with this thing, right, with this kind of a question, well, it turns out that a nice way to solve this is to think outside the box. I'll give a hint. Maybe somebody can type in the chat. My hint is draw 2 more triangles. Any ideas? You draw 2 more triangles, and then the problem becomes easy. Well, I'll do it. So if you have this picture, you can draw 2 more triangles. Oh, I should have been clear. This was a square. I think I said that. This is a square here. The square means that all 4 sides are the same length, okay? But if you draw 2 more triangles, what happens? Well, if I draw these two, yeah, left and right, thank you. If I draw these 2 more triangles, I get another square. And in fact, all of these triangles are the same. Well, now the problem becomes very simple, right? Because if I want to solve this question, now I just say, oh, that length, that's the hypotenuse. That's the long side of a right triangle. And that right triangle is 3 plus 4, which is 7. And another 3 plus 4, which is 7. So 7 and 7, now it's easy. Pythagorean theorem will just tell you that it's 7 times the square root of 2. Okay? So I just gave this example to be one which I actually love to use these kinds of things in order to teach. 7 root 2, thank you. Yeah, that's right. So I like to use these kinds of questions whenever I'm teaching. Actually, I did this thing on purpose, even though I know these are all parents. You didn't come here to learn math, right? You came here to think about things and listen to philosophies. But it's useless for me just to say a bunch of philosophies with no examples. This was an exact example of a question for which there is a very ugly brute force way which can be made to work. And if you think about it with some hints, almost everyone can figure it out. For me, the ideal kind of question, if you want to teach a student how to invent, the ideal kind of question is one where if they just look at it, they say, I don't know, I haven't seen it before. Also where if they use some brute force, they can beat it out. But then one where you can give 1 or 2 hints, and those hints have to be, you have to know the question is just right, so that if you give those 2 hints, that most people will be able to solve it. By the way, hint number 1 on this question was draw 2 triangles. Hint number 2 is just draw this yellow thing, okay? This yellow triangle. With those 2 hints, anyone who knows Pythagorean theorem can solve the problem. But that's actually how you teach someone how to invent things. You do not teach someone how to invent by showing them how you just did something and telling them to please do the same thing. I find that actually quite funny. I see some people sometimes teach classes on invention, and the way that they teach the class on invention is that they go over other people's inventions, and then you practice them. But that's not the point. The point is if you want to learn how to come up with something, you actually have to do the coming up yourself. That's the idea. Now, if you want to be able to have people learn in this way, then the challenge becomes, how do you keep finding these kinds of questions? For me, I always find that the math competitions are the best source of these. And what I do professionally as part of my work is that I also help to create my own and then use those to teach people. I mean, that's why I run all of these different online courses. But the point is, when you want to teach people these things, you want to create the questions just right, so that through this curriculum of questions, you'll be able to cover all of the important knowledge points, but cover them in a way where you come up with it yourself. Actually, I should say a little bit about even the philosophy there, which is also interesting. You see, many people are different. There are different kinds of teachers. And I respect different kinds of teachers. Some of them are so well prepared that they have very, very clear plan of what they will do, and they will show up on the board and they will do everything according to the plan, and it was very, very tightly timed and everything. Good for them. I have a very different approach. The way that I like to teach is I like to say, I have something I want to teach you, some way of solving a certain problem. To me, your ability is defined by whether or not you can solve problems that you haven't seen before in the area that I'm trying to teach. But the way that I usually do this, for example, at Carnegie Mellon University, is I'll just say, hey, today we want to do this question. Any ideas? I know you don't know how to do it because you came to the class to have me teach you how to do it, but I want you to brainstorm ideas. And I do this with every class that I teach at the university, which is different from other teaching styles. I'll go and say, suppose I have this question, how do you do it? What do you think? And as people suggest different ideas, what I do is I go and try to find out how I can complete some of their methods. And I often find out in the class that, oh, there's a new way to do this problem that I had never thought about before. I think that's actually very important. These days, because of the work we do with online education, I spend a lot of time interviewing teaching assistants. And so one of the questions we ask all our teaching assistants is, what do you think it means to be a good teacher? We interview very, very good people, and a lot of them give the answer that the teacher should be very flexible. Flexible means if they see another way that a student has come up with to solve the problem, then they are quick and figure out, oh, that's also okay. Actually, I'll tell you a story, something that happened. I just heard about it very recently, which was, oh, someone said, reminds me of promise. Yes, well said. But something that just came up that I heard about just a few days ago was that there was a very, very, very strong math student, and she was taking a chemistry class, and the chemistry teacher asked them to compute densities in something. And she came up with another way. She's really, really good at these like AMCs and math contests. So she's a high school student. She came up with a different way that's more efficient to calculate the densities. But the chemistry teacher told her, even though the answer is right, the chemistry teacher said, you're not allowed to do that. You have to do it the standard way, right? But what I'm trying to say is, I think the more important thing to do is to be able to come up with these unusual ways of solving things. And for that, it's a lot easier if, for example, if you're teaching your own kids, the way you do it is you do it in a way that's extremely flexible. Actually, when I teach my classes, the usual way I do it is I go in having my thoughts of how to do the problem. But by the time we're done, we have just found out that there are all these other ways. And what I explain to students is, what you have learned now is not only how to solve it, but now you also know why those other ways don't work. And sometimes that's very important, because if you don't know why the bad ways don't work, then you just have to remember everything. And then someday you see a slightly different situation and you don't know whether you're allowed to use the other way. In fact, even this word allowed, a lot of people will say things in math class of, am I allowed to do this? I find that always very funny. In math, who does the allowing? It's either true or not true. It's not me. Am I the one who makes the rules of math? No, it's not whether I allow you to. It should be that if it's true and logical, of course it's allowed. And if it's not true and not logical, you don't have to ask me. You can see that it's not allowed yourself. But that's what we want. And you see, if you build that ability, someday you might even be able to come up with something new. I do want to mention a little bit about what I actually work on, just to say a little bit about this coming up with something new. Because I'm the type of person who doesn't like to just tell people, oh, go do this, but myself not do it, right? So I'll tell you a bit about the things that I think about these days. Actually, that's why I was thinking about COVID, because the latest work that I work on, actually, I lead a team where we invented a new way to fight pandemics. It even made it into the national newspaper of Singapore last month or so. But at the time, it seemed like people weren't so interested because everyone said, oh, COVID is over. Well, I just saw that in Singapore, they are now discussing the problem of this new Southern African variant, the one that emerged from Southern Africa just now. So it might not be over yet. And so maybe this is actually relevant. But let me say very briefly what this is about, just to give some idea of what it means to try to come up with something different. So the origin of this is that my professional research area is network theory. And so when the pandemic broke out last year, well, when it became a big deal in the US last March, I started thinking, how can you use that network theory together with smartphones? Because this is the first pandemic where there are smartphones. And we came up with a very simple idea. Let's make an app that helps reduce your own chance of getting sick. I was very careful how I said that statement. Mathematicians are very careful with every word. Let's make an app that reduces my own chance of getting sick. Do you know that there's no other app, no other pandemic app in the world that does that? It's very interesting once you realize that. Again, the sentence was, let's make an app so that the app reduces my own chance. My app reduces my chance of getting sick. Well, if you think about all of the apps that are being used in China, United States, all over the world, Singapore, India, all of those apps are designed so that my smartphone helps you not get sick from me after I'm dangerous to you. This is a very important insight, and I'm sharing that because that's where math comes in. In mathematics, what we do is we look at a complicated world and we say, what is the most important driving force? And how do we focus on that? And this driving force that I'm talking about right now is game theory. Because one reason why it has not been possible to control this pandemic as it's running all over the world is because if you're relying on people to not get other people sick from them after it's too late from them, this doesn't work. It runs against normal incentives. So what we did is we said, no, let's make a different app. The whole purpose of the app is so that if I install the app myself and I use what the app shows me, it helps me not get sick. How to do this? Well, that's where math comes in. That's where more math comes in. It's actually network theory. I'll just draw something very briefly to indicate what this is about. You see, it's not actually a contact tracing app. The principle is, well, suppose you've got someone who's sick. What we do, which is different from everyone else, is that, you see, there's a big network here. Oh, well, I guess we're all Chinese in this particular audience, so I can just do this, right? So I've got all these people, right? So I've got all these people who happen to be inside this network. And if I have any two people who are connected by a line here, what that means is that those people spend lots of time nearby and often. And our idea is very simple, actually. Suppose this is you. If this is you, there's a concept of a network theoretic distance, which is what's the smallest number of steps it takes to get from one node, one person, to another. And in this case, that's 3 steps. So the sick person is 3 steps away from you. And so we just came up with this very simple idea. Whenever there's a new report of a person who got sick, tell everybody how far away that new report is as of that exact moment. Don't update it if the person goes nearer you later. No update, otherwise that is bad for privacy. It's just that there's a new person who's sick, and that new person, 3 strong relationships away from you. We can also say this in English or in any other language you want, that there's somebody who got sick, and they frequently spend time with someone who frequently spends time with someone else, who frequently spends time with you. That's it. Why is this useful? Well, then we can show people how this is changing over time. This is a simple bar chart. The date is June 3rd. And this is saying that here are all these different people. These are some people who are sick, who just got sick. And the horizontal axis is telling you how far away they are from you. So this is you. There's nobody sick who's only 1 strong connection from you. 2 strong connections away, still nothing. You're quite far from somebody who's sick. But then this thing can be played over time. So I'm letting this chart animate now. And what that means is that you see how the date is changing, And you see how the disease is striking people who are more and more and more relevant to you. The reason this is powerful is, imagine that the world starts to fall apart again with this new terrible variant. What if this new terrible variant gets past all the vaccines, right? That's bad. Actually, this COVID thing can kill you. We're only lucky now because I got enough vaccines. I kept getting vaccines. So, supposed to make it so even if I get it, I don't get hurt. But if this new one can go through anyway, oh no. Well, what does this do? This lets you protect yourself. How you use this. If you see the strikes coming closer and closer and closer, that does not mean there's a sick person walking towards you. No, that means that there are people getting sick and more people getting sick and more people getting sick, and they are getting, those sickness strikes are more and more close to you. Oh, if I saw this happening, I'd stay home. Or if I have to go out, I would actually go and wear the best possible mask I can have because I just don't want to get sick. And that's the beauty of it. We made the first app that you can, the only app that you can use, so that if you see some danger coming closer and closer to you, you can do something about it before it's too late. The way we explain it is that all the contact tracing apps in the world, which is everyone else, everything else in the entire world, the way those work is they will tell you after it's too late for you and tell you don't get anyone else sick. We were somehow the only people in the world to realize that if you want to do this properly, make an app that tells you before it's too late for you. And then it's powered by the same force that caused the United States to run out of toilet paper. The point is that why we ran out of toilet paper and rice and the beans and what, somehow suddenly everyone wants to eat rice. But like why we ran out of all those things is because you wanted to protect yourself. And that's it. Okay, this is actually surprisingly, for a disease that affected 7 billion people, caused 7 billion people to have to do various kinds of lockdowns or whatnot. It's remarkable that this idea was not thought about by anyone else. Somebody made a question. How does this model relate to the 6 degrees of separation? Great question. So degrees of separation is the similar concept. Degrees of separation is where you say, let's see how far away a person is from you along this kind of network, but it's a different network. In the 6 degrees of separation, they just want to know who knows who. Knows is like LinkedIn knows, right? That kind of knows. That's the degrees of separation for the 6 degrees of separation. So for example, if I pick a random person in the world, like, I don't know, the Prime Minister of Singapore, well, then there's definitely a path which is only less than or equal to 6 long. Not definitely, it probably is. That's less than or equal to 6 long, where I know this person on LinkedIn, they know that person on LinkedIn, and eventually goes to the Prime Minister. Okay, but this is different because this is where the two people have to spend time together nearby and often. Actually, my path between myself and the Prime Minister of Singapore, my gosh, that's probably in the hundreds or in the thousands. Because at some point you have to get through the Pacific Ocean. And there are relatively few people these days who spend lots of time frequently, often, on both sides of the Pacific Ocean, especially because if you go to China, I think you need to now stay quarantined for like 21 days or something, right? And so what I mean is that actually it might even be infinite distance. So the answer to your question is, actually, this was partly inspired by 6 degrees of separation, but doing this in a way where we're being very careful that these are physical contacts. How do you get reliably the data for the social network? Well, that was more math, actually. So what we do is we use Bluetooth. We don't use any LinkedIn. We don't use any Facebook. If you install the app, your phone talks to any other nearby phone which has the app using Bluetooth. And so if you have density of cell phones, I am assuming not quite density. It's basically that if the two phones detect that another phone is within Bluetooth range of it, then they start to communicate by Bluetooth the same way that you can connect to wireless headphones. And then we use the inverse squared law from physics, which says that the signal strength that you receive drops off with the square of the distance. There's a bunch of math inside there too. But I think the main thing I wanted, what if you switch? Yeah, if you switch your Bluetooth off, well, we saw that. I was in Brazil about 3 weeks ago because the Brazilian people were interested in things that I do. And over there, they said, we just have our Bluetooth off. I said, that's no problem. Actually, our app also uses Wi-Fi. So the way this also works is that it also checks to see if two phones are connected to the same Wi-Fi transmitter for many hours. Because the real thing we care about is we don't care about who saw the other person for 5 minutes. We care about who lives with who works in the same office sitting next to who goes to school sitting next to who all the time. and who frequently has lunch together or dinner together. This already captures the first three types very well. Just which Wi-Fi are you connected to? So no, I don't mean like which, I don't mean the company Wi-Fi. I mean which individual Wi-Fi transmitter are you connected to? And if you ever look at the ceiling, you'll see there are lots of transmitters, even on one floor. How do they know if they're sick or not? Yes, actually, since you're curious, I'll tell you about these things just so you know how a mathematician thinks through all of these problems. There are two ways. Some of the governments that we're talking to, they are already operating apps that know things about people. Then it can just be done automatically. But we designed ours to work even in the United States, where in the United States, the privacy expectations are that the government won't know who anyone is. In fact, this entire thing is totally anonymous. We don't care who anyone is. All we know is that these two smartphones were near each other, okay? Now, what we do is that, just like all the apps in the US, there's a button, and the button says, oh, I'm sick. You can only press the button using a password. So you won't have fake people saying, I'm sick. But what if you don't press the button? Actually, a lot of people missed that point. They said, don't worry, we'll make this work in the US. People will press the button. No, that does not work. We have two buttons. So we are the only ones who invented the idea of two buttons. The second button says, I'm not sick, but I was told that I am frequently around somebody who was sick. By the way, if you have kids in school, you're getting these emails all the time. I mean, I'm not getting the emails that my kids were around someone sick, but I keep getting emails from my school saying, oh no, new positive case in the school, this many positive cases. And they promised me that if you were really close, they will tell the parent, this kind of thing, right? What I'm saying is that this is happening, this kind of notification happening anyway. We take advantage of it. Because now in our system, suppose that this person says, I don't know what happened, but somebody told me that I was around someone who's sick. We're relying on the fact that there are people all over the place trying to find out who was around people who were sick. Okay, now this person presses the second button on our tool and tells everyone, hey, there's somebody who frequently spends time with someone else, who frequently spends time with you, and that somebody was around somebody who's sick. There's something in math called the triangle inequality. That means that the sickness is less than or equal to 3 steps away from you. It's close. It could be a little bit wrong. Maybe you find out that this person pressed the button and this person pressed the button. So you find out someone distance 4 away from you is around somebody who's sick. Okay, the truth is it's 3. But as you can see, there's a mistake of only about 1. And so what we have done is we have created the equivalent of a signal amplifier in electrical engineering way of thinking about things, where for every sickness, every sick person, suddenly we don't rely on just them to press. There are all these other people around them. Any of them can press, and then that amplifies the signal so that even if the sick person themselves doesn't press, somebody around them press. And then you still see on that warning chart that something's coming close. So the key insight was actually to go and use this concept that in electrical engineering, it's good to make an amplifier where you increase the signal level and there's some distortion, some noise. And for us, our noise is only plus or minus 1 in the distance on the network, but we can increase the signal by a factor of 5 to 10. So that's what goes on here. People said, what about people who don't have phones? We actually even have thought about how to do this for kids. Kids don't have phones. You can have the parent have an account. And the thing about the kids, if they're younger, they have a pretty well-defined network anyway. They just go to class. Actually, in my school, when I drop my kids off at school, I have to scan a QR code. I don't know if you guys are the same. The way my school works, they want every single student to first do this survey to say, I have no symptoms or whatever, and then say, okay, you showed up for school. And this is quite standard in many parts of the country. No problem. You can use that information to build a network. I'm basically saying that building the network for kids is trivial because kids don't have as many frequent long-term connections. Frequent close connections. The network for adults is the hard one because the adults have cars and they go everywhere. Kids don't have cars. As you know, once your kid has a car, then they go anywhere. But what I'm trying to say is that fortunately, it ends up being that the not having devices is not a problem. But actually, I should also say, why am I even working on this? I'm working on this not because of COVID. I'm working on this because I realized in around September of last year that we had accidentally invented something that could save the entire United States of America from a future lethal pandemic. Here's why. If you think about how America, which is where I live, where you live, many of you live, how we have handled this virus, the answer is we haven't handled it. We can't control it. And we are just lucky that this virus doesn't kill that many people. But there are some deadly viruses out there that can kill 50% of the people. If we had something like that, that's the end of the country. Except that this tool would do it. What would this tool do? Suppose there was a new disease that will kill half the people who get it, even young people, even medium people, even old people. How many people would want to download an app that will give them early warning of where it's striking? This is interesting. The purpose of the app is to help me. Of course. Pre-install app, don't need it. You don't even need pre-installed. What I'm trying to say is if you told people in the middle of a pandemic that buying more toilet paper will help you survive, wow, run out of toilet paper. I'm giving that example. That's a funny example. But basically, the concept here is if the principle is to help me and it's something pretty lethal, I want it. You don't have to pre-install it. I want it. This is what game theory is about. And if you flip it around and you go and say, it's a zombie detector, right? But if you flip this around and say, hey, got deadly pandemic, how many of you want to have an app that will tell you when it's too late for you so that the government can go and make sure you don't get anyone else sick? That is much less compelling. So the point is, yeah, just flip it around. But the second thing is, suppose you saw, oh no, here come the zombies. Suppose you see on this app that the disease is striking closer and closer and closer. Well, what would the average person do? The average, what do you think? So, but I see the people are typing in the chat, so it's more fun. Suppose that you found out, suppose an average person found out, boom, 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 it's striking closer and closer. What will they do? They'll take steps to prevent being a zombie. They'll run. They'll hide in the basement. They'll not go out. And the beauty of it is that we've actually achieved what all this contact tracing was trying to do in the first place. We've separated the two groups of people. The point is, the entire goal is to separate the dangerous people from everyone else. And for the entirety of human civilization, people just control the dangerous people, and that doesn't work because that runs against those people's incentives. What we said is, these people don't want to die. If it's not too late for you, you will do lots of things to try to help yourself. It's only after it's too late that then you start to be like, whatever, it's too late. And you don't go and think how to save everyone else while you're on your way out. The surprising thing is that what I just told you is so simple, you can explain it to a fifth grader, but nobody else thought of it. And I give that as an example of what I mean by invention or like learning in different ways, right? The goal is not to just be able to come up with a standard method and follow standard methods, right? That's how you made all the rest of the contact tracing apps in the entire world. Actually, that was an example of people seeing what a few countries at the beginning did and just everyone copy, 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 copy. All you made is a whole bunch of useless things. Instead, what we did is we just said, what should you actually be doing with these phones? Oh, people install apps that help them. What a concept. How do you make an app to help you? That's what we should do. So this is an example of what I actually do. And I do like to think about new ideas. In fact, just to wrap up this part of the talk, that's all I do for fun. In fact, even that's all I do with even the work I do. I'm one of these terrible people where if you tell me, go do this, I will say, that's kind of boring. Let me try to figure out why you told me to do this. I'm going to give you a counter plan, something that will achieve your goals better than you thought. And I will not be doing this, because it's no fun to just follow your orders. Right? And so this is just how I like to go through life. I got it when I was growing up in school. Whenever I was doing these math contest problems, I wasn't just trying to do it fast, do it the standard way. I was trying to actually come up with my own way because I thought that was more fun. I'm seeing a few comments here. Oh yeah, various people are typing about this thing. Yeah, I didn't even say the name of the app because actually I'm not here to promote the name. I'm not here to promote the app. Don't install it. That's not what I'm saying. I'm working on the app not because I want to promote that app, but because the idea is so obvious that I'm promoting the idea with the goal that within 2 to 5 years, it will be so widely known that in all future pandemics, some version of that is used. And it might be made by the government of the country. It might be made by Google, it might be made by Apple. I don't care. All I care is that in 2 to 5 years, it's well understood that whenever you have a pandemic, you make an app to help the app user not get sick. And if that's done, well, that was enough of a contribution, because that will have changed how human civilization fights every pandemic forever. And how this comes because you have an attitude of learn how to invent, right? That's why I'm trying to tie this all around. And what's actionable? Well, when you're learning how to do math, do not try to do the thing which I said at the beginning, which is to go and practice until the exam is automatic. If you have done that, you've wasted your time in the United States. That's necessary in other countries because other countries have exams. And if you have to do the exams, sorry, I'm talking about 小升初, if you know what I'm referring to. But if you have some particular exams that doing very well gives you big advantage, you have no choice. You must just practice. In the USA, no such things. So if you have no such things, the only thing you should be doing is you should be using your time to think about questions where you don't know how to do the problem, but with 2 hints, you can. And then you spend your whole life just thinking about how to come up with new ideas. Thank you. So I think we maybe can switch to Q&A at this point. At least that's what my team told me. I don't know how you guys want to run this.
Yes, Professor. Okay. I've been want to do an interview with you since we first met before COVID, and
Sure.
today I'll take the advantage and ask us 3 or 4 questions. 3 or 4. Would you take 3 or 4?
Sure.
Okay, so I ask these questions quickly, and hopefully you can answer quickly. Then we still have time for our participants today. Ready?
Yes.
The first, we all know you are a mathematician and educator. You are very devoted in math and educating others. So is there any moment in your life you feel so frustrated and you want to quit math? And if so, how did you overcome any failure you might have experienced?
So I can say that I never was really the kind of person to want to quit something because I'm attracted to the challenge of the task. So I think that's an important detail. It's that I actually like doing things because they're hard. And that, by the way, is related to a quote that John F. Kennedy said when we were trying to get to the moon, I think, which is that you try to get to the moon precisely because it is hard. And if you try to do things that are hard, then you actually get something, you actually learn something. So what I'm going to say is, I was always the kind of person for whom, if it's hard, it just makes me want to fight more. And I'm saying this on purpose because the sooner you can switch to that mentality, the more you can do. I've seen this pattern in lots of people where if they're the kinds who say, oh, this was hard, they get demoralized because they didn't solve it and then they give up. I was in a conversation similar to this to someone else on a related topic just this week. And what I said was, actually for me, if I just keep succeeding, then the thinking in my mind is, oh no, I'm not trying hard enough things. I expect to get doors closed in my face. I expect to get no as answer. I expect to get stuck. If I'm not getting those feelings, something is wrong. That's actually how I feel. It's wrong. There's a big problem if I'm not running into all these obstacles all the time. So I'm actually saying, if you can switch the way that makes you feel happy to move there, then you'll do much better. And how you do that, that's where parents comes in. Because it's important not for your kids to think that their success is only based on whether they achieved it. Otherwise, they get very scared of failing because they get scared. Oh, I tried this competition and I did badly. I didn't make the school team. Am I bad? You know what I mean? Like, you need to give them the encouragement that, no. The fact that you're getting up again and trying again, I encourage that. Because I know if you're the kind of person who just gets up again, you actually will win because most people don't get up that many times. So my answer to your question is I didn't ever feel like quitting math. I did always run into difficult things. I did math contests. How you do this? What's a proof? I don't know. All right. And then suddenly, go to math Olympiad contests, sometimes do very poorly. At some point, I was learning how to do research. Research is where you think about problems the world has never solved before, cannot make any progress, but that's okay. That's just part of the game.
Okay, well said. I think this also answers my second question. Like, people say you won't like something and enjoy something until you master it. So I guess you are not a big believer of this. you like challenges. It's not necessary to be good at something to like something.
Yes, yes. So if what you said was that the challenges are what you go for, yes. I actually think that's the most important thing. You should go for the challenges. And it's not that it's not like you should feel like, oh, doing the challenges and failing makes you feel bad, right? It should be that you're doing the challenges, and as you do the challenges, you start to notice, oh wow, I can actually create something.
Okay, so my next question. So 小枇杷is a magazine in Chinese, the only Chinese language magazine in the U.S. So we'd like to ask a question about your Chinese background, and hopefully you can answer it in Chinese, and I will
好，
ask in Chinese. 我们都知道您的父母是新加坡华裔，您在美国出生。那您在童年的时候，就是对中文有多少的接触？然后您是在什么样的机会开始认真的学习中文，然后掌握这门语言的？是
好 ，OK， 那我应该说，其实我小的时候我们在家是说英语的，其实不只是英语，就是那个 Singlish， 对不对？因为那些从新加坡过来的人，可能每一个句子一半是中文，一半是英语，有时候那些字是用用别的语言，就是因为他们就是想用什么语言最方便来表达他们的意思，所以我就习惯一直听英语，但是因为我的父亲其实他的家庭是说广东话的，所以他就比较习惯大部分的就是说英语。其实现在我们每一个星期每一周给我的父母打电话，其实是让我的孩子跟我的父母打电话，我们都是用全英语的。而且现在，如果我自己一个人跟我的父母打电话，我们是用全英语的。他们说英语，我说英语，我回答的是英语。那我是怎么学好那个中文呢？其实我就是每个周末就上一个中文课。那时候我也觉得，其实我对中文的感觉就是，其实这个是有意思的。其实我就觉得这是一个新的东西，就是新的语言，我是对那个有兴趣的。所以其实我是喜欢上那些周末的中文课的。然后我上高中的时候，我选的外语在我的学校，就是一个美国学校我选的外语是中文。但是我应该说那些以前上的那些周末的中文课可能教我更多，但是在高中的时候我就上那个中文课。我去大学之后，我一直对我的我父母的文化，就是这个中国的文化有兴趣，所以我一上大学我就开始认识这些从中国过来的留学生，因为我是在 Madison Wisconsin 长大。在那个地方没有那么多华人，但是一去加州理工上大学，突然有不少的从中国过来的留学生，所以我就故意，如果在宿舍碰到他们，我就故意用中文来聊天，就只是因为我想也练习一点中文，学一点中文，我也觉得好玩。但是那时候我的中文也不是那么好，我只是在玩。然后毕业了之后，毕业大学之后，我就过好几年，可能过了5到10年，一句中文都不说，也不听，因为我就是在念博士，就五年，差不多5年，我就一直只是念博士做数学这样。但是突然我就有这些机会，我开始有一个机会去中国来跟一个网络教育公司一起合作，因为他们找到我，他们说，哎，我们可不可以拍一些网课？那时候我就说，哦，其实这个就是一个机会，我想比较理解，我想更深的理解中国是怎么样，因为我小的时候从来没去过中国，我的父母是从新加坡，所以那时候我就跟他们一起拍一些数学网课，但是我自己是去中国来去不同的城市。那时候我就真的有这些机会学中文的，因为我就过去差不多3年，每2个月跑去中国一个星期，那个就真的给我那个机会，天天说中文，说很多跟很多不同的人来谈话，然后因为那时候当有一个很强的动力来学中文，我就能够把我的中文提到这样的水平。 我是这样说，因为你的孩子，你们的孩子，肯定他们的中文比我小的时候的中文好得多。肯定，因为我小的时候，我跟我的家人，我爸爸妈妈，我们都是说差不多70%、80%是英语，他们说也是这样，他们说的话也是这样，所以那就是我的学习中文的这条路。
对，那我总结一下，你的动力首先来自于对父母文化的好奇，然后
对
是大学同学，然后最后是有实际工作中的运用。
对对对，但是我这样说，因为我现在真的认为，如果你有2个语言，这个可以给你很大的帮助。因为现在如果我在中国，我也可以做事；我在美国也可以做事。比如我这个 COVID 之前，我也是在跟清华大学一起合作，我们那时候在办一个夏令营，给中国的高中学生来参加。所以这很方便。如果你有2个语言，我不只需要在美国办这些数学夏令营，或者那些奥数的训练夏令营，我也可以在中国做那个事啊。所以我就觉得这个是因为有这个实用的那个好处，所以最好是小的时候也专心来学那个中文。
是的，是的，我们太同意这句话了。Okay, my last question related to today's topic. If you had to quit all your work in the math area, what would be something different you would want to do? And is there anything you want to invent?
Yes. So now this is going to be, it's still related to math, but the key ideas are from performance. So I actually really like performance, talking, and communication. Somebody asked me that question quite recently, and I said I would try to be an actor or somebody who is in the performance area. Because I really think that if you understand performance, you can communicate ideas in a way where people will listen. This is part of my educational philosophy, by the way. Even though just now I was talking about this, learn how to invent. Actually, that's only one part of my education philosophy. The other part is that the job of the teacher is to suck you in and to make you really want to follow. So let me tell you actually the things I'm working on right now that I'm working on inventing, which are actually on this education. Yes, it's related to math, but it actually is a new way of teaching online that can be used to teach anything. Let me explain to you what this is, because it's actually going to launch next month. So this was inspired by Zoom class. I don't know how many of you watched your kids struggle with Zoom online education over the pandemic, but it was a disaster. Because what the kids would do is that the Zoom starts to play, and then they put the earphones in, and then they go and play Minecraft instead. They turn the camera off, and they go surf internet, do everything else, and not pay any attention. And the online teaching, most people said online teaching was a failure. Most people said online teaching is bad. But actually, I can tell you the thing that we're inventing right now, which makes the online teaching a benefit. So I think about scale. I like to do things on a big scale. Whenever I think about how I want to attack a problem, I want that the solution can reach as many people as possible. One of my goals when I became the national coach of the US Math Olympiad team was to reach tens of thousands of students, to have them interested in learning math. Now the goal is bigger. Now it's hundreds of thousands. But now the problem is there are not enough teachers. If you want to have a teacher who is able to explain everything very clearly and also can perform to make you want to pay attention, you can't. There are not enough of those people to run small classes, 1 teacher, 20 students. So let me tell you what we're doing. And that's why I'm interviewing all these teaching assistants. This is actually for the daily challenge with Po-shen. This is online courses that we run. We right now have those courses in a way that is self-paced. So you're able to take the courses, and it all has these videos of me teaching, which are already cut carefully in small pieces, where it asks you questions in between for you to be able to answer, which is good. And we've had thousands of people learn these. But people also gave me the feedback that they wanted to have a way to have live interaction too, to be able to ask questions. So here's what we're doing. We're hiring teaching assistants who are high school students all around the country, but they are super smart high school students. We interview them carefully. Now, most high school students who are super smart aren't yet great at communication. They're very good, but they're not great at communication. What we do is we actually enroll all of these super smart high school students in performance classes to teach them improvisational comedy.
Wow.
The reason I'm doing this, by the way, is because I was once one of those high school students. And I know that if you give very smart high school students a chance to practice learning how to perform, they will get skills that they could never get in school. Because in school, if they suddenly stand on a table and perform, everyone says, but you're the math nerd. What are you doing? They were just, no chance, no chance. But what we said is, no, no, no. We will give these people a chance to perform in front of the middle school students that they're teaching twice a week. We're actually giving the high school students a priceless opportunity. I say priceless because if you're a super smart math student, how often will you actually be the one that is going to be on stage? You are the star. That's what's supposed to be. Okay, once you did that, you suddenly have thousands of high school students who want to join this thing. And now what we're doing is that they are now being the teaching assistants for our course. What does that mean? Actually, that's also an innovation in itself. It's not possible for a high school student to explain the math concept all the way from the beginning. They don't have that experience. That takes years of experience to say very efficiently how to do this concept. That's okay. I already recorded all of the videos. So what happens is that this is why there's two high school teaching assistants. One of them goes on the screen and at the beginning of class says, hello, everyone, welcome to class. Professor Low, can you give us the problem for today? The other one presses play. My part jumps off. It's Zoom. We are now taking a full advantage of Zoom. If I jump on, it's as if I was there, if that makes sense. Because it takes the screen. I'm basically saying, take what was bad about Zoom and turn it into advantage. So now suddenly it's as if I'm there. I'm done talking in 1 minute. And then the other teaching assistant comes in and says, okay, who has ideas on how to solve this problem? Now they lead a brief interaction. And then they say, Professor Low, how do you do this problem? How do you explain this? Okay, then it plays my part. In the middle of my part, if a student posts in the chat that they don't understand one piece, why is the square root of 8 equal to 2 root 2? Well, the other teaching assistant jumps back onto the screen and says, let me explain that for you. The square root of 8 is like this. Here's how you take square root of a number. It only takes 30 seconds to explain. When they're done, they say, Professor Low, could you please continue? Do you see what I'm saying? We have this is going to be the same level of impact as when recorded music was invented. Before recorded music, you were not able to have music in your house unless you hired the musician to be in your house. After the recording of the music was invented, you can have the music. And this is the equivalent of DJs. So what we're doing is we're actually giving these picked from all over the country, these super strong math students, we're giving them an experience of a lifetime, which is that they get to learn how to act. They get a chance to be on the camera, supposed to be the stars, teaching them confidence, which they will then use to change their life later. Because now they're not going to be limited by only being able to know math. They'll have had all these experiences being the star. So they win. The middle school students, what they see is they see people teaching them who look not old like me, but someone that they can relate to. This is actually related to psychology. People will follow other people if they see, oh, you're sort of like me and you're having so much fun. You know why you're having so much fun? It's because we put 2 teaching assistants in a room. And the 2 teaching assistants have a very clear job. Whatever she says, you say, yes, that's great, and add some more. And then when he's done, she says, yes, and jumps off of it too. This is why on most TV shows, you have 2 people. And what they do is they just support each other. What this does for the students, by the way, is that they see, oh, wow, those people are having so much fun and they have good friends and they do it through math. Maybe I want to do math too. So I'm just giving this as an example. When you talk about invention or when you mention the word invention, this doesn't exist. There's nobody in the world who's ever come up with a system for which you would use the online to an advantage and that you would actually be able to have the people who are providing the service, which is the high school students, getting an experience out of it that they simply cannot get in the world today. That's why we have people applying, because they want to do it. And they know that if they don't do it with us, there's just no other way on earth to get this. And then I realized, oh yes, because I work on university admissions sometimes. I said, oh, I see easily. There are thousands of people who fit this bill, who fit this category, where then actually where this vision is that we actually are even trying to make this into a community. Because why are those high school students wanting to join? Because if they get selected through the interview process and become part of this community, then they suddenly are around all these other friends for whom those are all ambitious people, very smart, selected to a safe community. And then we make it so they get to know each other in pairs automatically. So every 2 months they meet another friend. The vision, of course, is when at some point they go to university, they show up, and maybe at their elite university, there will probably be another 100 people who came from this program, who were working in this program at the same university. And because of network theory, they either have already taught before with each other, or they have taught with someone who has taught with them, giving them instant network when they go to university. So anyway, I'm just outlining this thing. What is it? Is it math? It's not math research, but it's an example of problem solving where what I was saying is we got some various problems in the world. How do you do education? How do you motivate people? How do you get enough? How do you scale up those talented people to be able to teach? The key is you go and cut apart the task so that certain parts of the task where there aren't enough people, use the recording. And certain other parts of the task, you just find these very smart people and you give them the skills to fill the rest, which somehow no one's giving them anyway. Okay, that's probably not the answer you were expecting, because this is not, actually you guys are getting an early announcement of this. Most people don't know this is launching. It's just that the high school community from whom we're hiring teaching assistants knows this is happening because they're all applying in, right? So this is secretly, not secret anymore, but the news is spreading across the high schoolers first as we were bringing in them to help. And by the way, if any of you know high school students who would be interested in being part of this, I'm sure that we'd be able to give you information on how to apply. It's actually quite competitive to get in.
So will this launch on your website, the daily?
Yeah, this will launch on Daily Challenge.
No, daily, right? Daily Po-shen, right?
Right. So the link to the entire thing, by the way, is just called the Daily Challenge with Po-shen. And I want to emphasize, that's just the new thing we're building. Of course, we already have the classes. Those classes have already been taken by thousands of people. And this new thing is supposed to be the next level of service where make the whole thing interactive.
Okay, I will check it out. Very,
you bet.
and I look forward to it, to seeing